Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite, thanks to Rode Microphones.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, ladies!
Here we go.
Welcome to another edition of the Pro Audio Suite. This week we're focusing on a thing that sends chills up my spine, I have to say, the world of audiobooks. And we have the full complement on board, including a couple of special guests from Brisbane, Simone Feiler, and from LA, Scott Brick. I assume you're from LA, Scott?
I am from LA.
Oh, good.
I live almost across the street from Universal Studios, so I'm eminently from LA.
Oh, well positioned.
Well positioned indeed. Now, the world of audiobooks, like I said, it does send a bit of a chill up my spine because I was asked to do audiobooks and I've always said no. And I think I know why I say no. One is because it's reading a book and recording yourself.
Well,
That's
the first
pretty
problem,
hardcore.
step before that, is you've got to be able to read, Andrew.
Yeah, well, there is that as well. And quite frankly,
That's a stepping stone. That's a stepping stone on the way, but I totally get it.
well, it's interesting because you both come from opposite sides of the glass. Simone records them.
That's right.
And you read them, but you also record them as well, I guess.
I do. I treasure the moments when I can go to Random House here in Los Angeles and I can run into 10 other narrators, 10 producers, and we can chat about it, and I can say, oh my God, this is the best book in the world, or oh my God, this is the worst book in the world. Anyway, in 2008, I bought the rights to a series, my favorite books of all time, and they had never been done on audio, and I thought, well, if I buy the rights, maybe it would be cheaper if I put in my own studio. So yes, ever since then, I've been recording my own audiobooks.
Simone, voice talent who record their own audiobooks must be your worst enemy.
Yeah, I don't work with them directly. Well, I have actually voiced the odd audio book as well, but I'm like my worst critic, so I can't imagine how it is for you, Scott, because I'm incredibly picky if I'm voicing it going, I've got to redo that. So I specialise now in author narration, and they are really good. The majority of them are excellent.
Yes, I think they get a bad rap. I love listening to authors read their own work. And it's so funny because so many of our colleagues will complain about like, oh, God bless it, these authors wanted to record their own stuff. It's like, Canadians coming down to America trying to steal our jobs, and I'm like, guys, come on, it's their work. So let them do it. And I honestly, I treasure listening to authors recording their own work. It's not always the best from a technical perspective, either, sound quality wise or performance wise, but it's authentic.
What I've heard from more of the producers and the technical side of it, they get a bid and they say, okay, because a lot of the times the authors want their book to be put onto tape, but they don't necessarily have a publisher paying for it, everything. So the author is having to do with it themselves, and the author goes to an engineer or a company that deals with the recordings, and if the quote is that the author wants to read it, the quote is twice as much as if a talent.
Wow.
Who can rip through it reads.
Is that
because they just
right?
know that if they
Interesting.
get this talent, if they know that they get this talent, well, we can do X pages in a day. But the author, especially because they're so close to their own project,
Of course, yeah.
it makes the whole process just explode. And like they're the
Well, I can tell you this. One gentleman who writes a science fiction series, he said, well, we were told that we would have to, he writes with another author, a co-author, and it was like, well, we're going to have to sign off on an abridgment because the publisher has decided that there would be an abridged and unabridged production. And he knew that a character who was barely mentioned in book 1 of a trilogy would be the main character in book 3. And he wanted to make sure that very minor character in book 1 wasn't edit it out. And he he approached the audio division and said, it might be a good idea if I put in more time and care with this. Why don't you let me do the abridgment? And the publisher said, you don't want to do that. And he said, no, I do. I really do, because it's important, because this guy from book 1 is barely mentioned, and in book 3, he's going to be the major character. Yeah, you don't want to do that. No, I really do. I really do. And this is why. And the publisher said, this is what it pays. And the author looked at it and said, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Which begs the first question about working harder or smarter.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I actually, when I get the authors in, because the authors approach me, I'm like a self-publishing audio business, and I charge the authors less to narrate here on their own than what I charge, the talent. Because I do think it's really important that they get to actually read their own book, because the story from the horse's mouth is better than hearing it secondhand. And they've put so much time, work and effort into that thing that, you know, if they can string words together, obviously, and they've done a lot of public speaking about it, then they're the best person as far as I'm concerned to read their book. But having said that, I have had the odd person in that I've had to say, yeah, this can't happen. I would be editing every word together.
Have you ever had them where they're too persnickety, like they hear their own voice, and it's that immediate reaction when you hear your own voice on a recording, you're like, that's not me.
Yeah. Well,
I sound like that.
I don't let them listen to it until the end. Yeah. I gauge, whether I think it's going to be a good delivery, and whether it's going to be engaging to the listener. And, they'll say, oh, my voice is awful. I hate listening to my own voice. And I'm like, don't worry about your voice. Just think about your story and who you're talking to and who you're engaging with, and it'll all sound fine. And generally they're okay. And afterwards, the majority of them have said, yeah, that sounds really good. So they're pretty happy with it. But should I put cans on them, they would probably be going, oh my God, I can't do this. It's awful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
When I think of the 3 best audiobooks I've ever heard in my life, from an author-read perspective, one was by Orson Scott Card, one was by Harlan Ellison, and one was by, I believe his name was William Peter Blatty, who he wrote The Exorcist, and that was the book that he read. And all 3 of them, before they became writers, they were actors. And
is that right?
And so they understood nuance, the things that you could do in audio, just acting subtleties. They understood it in a way that most other authors probably wouldn't, because they just haven't lived that life. Nevertheless, there's an author, one of my favorite authors of all time, Roger Zelazny. He wrote The Chronicles of Amber. And he did an audiobook of, I want to say, Eye of Cat. It's one of the last books he ever wrote. But they hired him to read it. And from a technical perspective, from my perspective as a performer, as a voiceover artist, it's not a work of art. And yet, he passed away 25 years ago. And I still get to hear his voice. I get to hear his voice reading his work. And I think, I don't care how,
it's like Chopin,
however you want
Chopin.
to describe, whether it's good or bad. I don't give a shit whether you, forgive me, I don't know whether I'm allowed to cuss on this podcast.
We're Australians. Swear all you fucking like.
Yeah, or not. Okay.
Fuck yeah.
Okay, fuck it.
Totally.
Fuck it.
Okay.
I don't give a shit
Really went downhill.
whether people think it's... I don't give a shit whether people think it's good or bad. I think it is priceless because I get to hear Roger Zelazny reading his own work.
Yeah.
So is it Chopin who died in the very late 18th or 19th century, I think? But great pianist and composer. And there's a few recordings of him they're shitty. But there's this company that takes those recordings and analyzes them, mistakes and everything, and they program it back into a Yamaha disc clavier, which is like a computerized acoustic piano that will play. And then what you have is Chopin himself in the room.
Wow.
Oh my God!
100 years
That's
later.
cool.
Oh my God!
That's awesome.
Yeah. And they analyze, like, somehow they figure out what pedals and everything were pressed when, But anyways.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I'm interested to know from both of you. Let's start with Simone. Besides what I can only imagine must be infinite patience, what sort of skills are required on top of, like, well, let's say an audio engineer who does radio imaging or advertising, and a voiceover artist who does commercial stuff?
Well, patience is definitely one of them, Robbo. Yes. Yeah. I'll give you the drill there. But generally speaking, I guess maybe not. I mean, really, I guess the difference with a commercial is that you're selling something, whereas with your book, you're telling a story, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a little bit different from in that aspect. But recording-wise, I don't think it's very, very different at all. No.
Yeah. So are you directing talent? Are you directing the talents in the booth, or do they just sit in a corner and record and then you edit?
No, I engineer them. So I sit out here, they're in the booth, but I let the tape roll. There's places and people, and probably Scott will agree with me that a lot of people drop edit, but because these people aren't used to recording, I don't want to put them off when they're on flow, even if they stuff up. So I'll let the tape roll, and then the real hard work comes in afterwards where you have to edit the book. So generally,
is a drop edit a punch in?
Yeah, punch in.
Punch in, or the other new name for that is punch and roll.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a pretty book industry specific term.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what you go through on the other side of the glass. I remember years ago going to a book event, a print book event, Book Expo America, and there was I won't say their name, but they were really proud of the fact that they kind of helped audiobook narrators create their own home studios, saying, hey, you should work alone. And of course, unspoken is that would be cheaper for us because we don't have to pay anybody else, right? And I knew one of these guys. He had worked at a previous company, a previous publisher that I worked for a great deal. And so I had known him for 10 years, and he had switched companies and gone to this new company. And he sees me at Book Expo America and says, hey, Scott, come on over. I want to introduce you to these librarians. And he says, so, Scott, we've got a couple of librarians here, and they're looking to, invest in a couple of books. They're looking to buy a couple of titles. And isn't it better to be able to work alone? And I looked at him and I thought, well, here in America, we've got this saying, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I said, no, not at all. It is not better to work alone. I said, I loathe working alone. I treasure working with other people because I think publishing is a better industry if it's collaborative. And he looked at me like I'd farted in church. He looked at me like a slow-witted child. He was furious with me. And the two librarians said, why do you say that? And I said, I'm not always right. And it always helps if somebody else can backstop me and let me know for sure. And oh my God, that man has to this day never spoken to me again because I cost him a sale. But it's the truth. It's books are certainly precious to the author, and any time I get hired to read an author's work, it becomes precious to me. So the idea that we would have to record it all alone in our own home studios and, fewer eyes on the prize, I hate that model, but that's me.
I'm curious how much you actually get down on tape per day.
I love the fact that you use the word that you use the phrase on tape. because how long has it been since we've actually? There's a
Old
studio
school.
in New York.
Old school.
Right, exactly. There is a studio in New York on 9th Avenue, and forgive me, I am forgetting the name of it, but
It's 9th Avenue Sound.
no. There's a lot of places on 9th Avenue, but that isn't the one. But when I went in their lobby, they had a framed razor blade. And,
yeah.
and it has a little bronze plaque below it that said introduced 1920, retired 1997. Essentially when Pro Tools was introduced.
Yeah.
And I love that. I respect so much the people who actually edited audiobooks with a razor blade. And,
Oh my God! Yeah,
Oh my God.
Right?
yeah, that's a nightmare.
Right.
I'm going to have tonight. I can see
I
it.
don't want to dream of that tonight.
Have you ever seen someone running it, like actually doing the editing on like in action?
I've seen myself doing it.
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done it for sure.
But not audiobooks. That would be such a crazy long time. It takes 2 hours for me to edit every hour recorded by an author. And I reckon if I was splicing, I would be there for like 5 hours
6
per
hours.
hour.
Yeah.
Do you know what though? When you were splicing, you weren't so picky.
No.
Like you
it's
forget
true.
deep breathing. That ain't going in. That's
nah.
staying.
Oh,
yeah.
my
Could you imagine?
God. That's a whole new level,
and
Andrew.
replacing it with like,
Yeah.
let's get a whole reel of room tone so we can slice in the room
Exactly.
tone and the-
Yep. You just have stuck on the wall the room tone, just cutting bits out.
That's the worst horror movie you could imagine. I reckon that right there.
Yeah, totally.
The worst tape edit I heard of was a window edit on a multi-track tape.
Oh,
So they-
yes. Where they cut one of the tracks out, like a little
They
slot.
sliced out one of the channels.
Yeah.
And replaced that like a window edit. That's insane.
Wow.
But I never saw that in action. But yeah.
I think someone told us they did that on a Doors record, on a Doors recording, on a
Did they?
multi-track. They
That's
had
amazing.
to replace something, and they cut like a letterbox slot and replaced it.
Exactly. Crazy.
Good God.
Far out.
Well, I can tell you that the best audiobook narrator who ever lived, Frank Muller, I got to meet him once. We were inducted into the Hall of Fame at the same time. We have a very dear mutual friend who has told me that Frank used to tell him that, I used to be able to get 3 or 4 hours of finished audio product. Right. In the audiobook industry, it's like, well, is it 3 hours, 3 studio hours, or 3 recorded hours, 3 finished hours? And he said, I used to be able to get 3 or 4 finished hours done per day. He put in his own home studio, and he was like, oh, Jesus Christ, I can only get like 1, maybe 2 hours done a day, because he would be, his own worst critic.
And
It's a
how
thing.
much of that takes out the life of it, actually? Like, how much of that, you think about music recording, and sometimes let the flubs be in there, let it have some organic space, and it feels more real. And if you get everything like so polished, it kind of takes the life out of the music. Is there any aspect of that the authenticity or the, like, I mean, you don't leave out the obvious errors, but, trying to edit and fix everything, does it end up making it more sterile? Is there something to be said for leaving it alone?
I have heard stories about people who were recording a song and they made a mistake and they thought, you know what, this should just go in because it's authentic.
Louie.
And yes, right, exactly. Yeah,
The
exactly.
drummer literally goes, oh, fuck, and they're all shit right in the middle of recording it.
Is that right?
It's in there
Yeah.
for all time.
New way.
Yeah.
That and yet it's become a classic.
Totally.
And we don't have the luxury of editorializing on the copy. And I wouldn't want to, frankly. But nevertheless, I think that all of us can recognize authenticity when we hear it. And so many of you're from Australia. and you've got the movie about the dingo ate my baby.
Oh, yes.
Meryl Streep did. Okay. She, at least in America, is referred to as the best actress of our generation because she puts so much effort into her accents. And yet I dated an Australian for so many years who told me it drove her crazy every time she saw that film.
Yes.
And had to hear her say,
wrong.
the dingo ate my baby. Matter of fact, she forbade me from using an Australian accent for years because of the way that I presented it. But the fact of the matter is, you can hear what is real and what is not. That's why I always say, from my perspective as a voice actor, I can aim for one of two things. I can aim for both, and yet you're rarely able to get both. There are two things that you can aim for. There's accuracy, and then there is authenticity. And I'll define my terms. Accuracy would be a Meryl Streep level performance where you were absolutely fucking nailing the accent.
And it's repeatable.
Yes, right, exactly. Or you can go for authenticity, which is, in my mind, it is the emotional authenticity of the scene, which to me is more important. Because even in Sophie's Choice, which was the performance where Meryl Streep came to the world stage, it's where she first drew acclaim. She had put in so much effort to be precise. And when I watched Sophie's Choice, I couldn't help it. I didn't want to criticize her. I didn't want to critique her. She's one of the greatest actresses of our of the last 200 years. And yet I was like, wow, 3 times, boom, she flat out failed in that accent. And you as Australians, I'm sure could say the same thing about, dingo ate my baby.
Yeah.
When I am doing a book, I want to do a hint of an accent. I want to suggest an accent. I want to aim instead of the accuracy of the accent, I want to aim for the emotional authenticity of the accent because I think audiences will be more forgiving that way.
I think most people don't know the subtleties of an accent.
Totally.
As a human, they key on the emotional content much faster than they know the differences between a real Australian accent and "I mighty" or whatever
Well, it's true. Look, the rhotic accent, which applies to both the British, the RP accent, as well as the Australian accent. When you grow up speaking that accent, it actually changes your palate.
your brain.
It changes your brain, but it also changes the back of your throat, which is why Australians and UK citizens can do American accents far better than we can do the opposite. Using a particular accent actually changes the back of your throat, which is why I always say, as I told you, my partner from many years ago forbade me from doing an Australian accent. I'm like, well, okay, maybe I can do a little bit, just enough to suggest to the listener that I'm doing it, and they can fill in the rest. And yet, not aiming for accuracy, because if I did, they would go, yeah, he failed there. Yeah, he failed there. Oh, Jesus. Oh, yeah, he failed there and there and there.
It's like a stage set. You're going for the impression and set the stage and put the scene out there and get someone involved in the scene. And as long as you get them in the right country, feeling that they are not relating to you as one of their own, but they kind of hear you as being a foreigner and from their perspective, I think, job done, essentially. And as long as you don't feel like you're
absolutely
tripping through it and trying to force an accent, then that's the what do they call it? Like the suspension of disbelief. I believe that person's Australian. They're not, but
I think people are willing to suspend their disbelief far more if you aim for authenticity rather than accuracy. And look, my evidence is all anecdotal, but I remember in the early 90s, I was playing Cyrano on stage. I remember like it was yesterday, going to the cast party in the lobby. The only time I've ever spoken with this woman, I was still in costume. I still had my nose on because, we were using a medical adhesive. It took me like an hour and a half to take it off. But it was worth it, totally worth it. And she said, "How old are you?" And at the time, I think I was 23, 24, and I told her so. And she said, "How have you lived long enough to develop such a flawless French accent?" And I said, "I wasn't using a French accent." She said, "Yes." And she said, "Yes, you were." And I said, "No, I'm the one who was doing it. I'm really aware of the fact that I wasn't." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, on the very first rehearsal for this show, there's 30 people in the cast, and we asked who can do a French accent. And if there was one person who couldn't, then we said we would not use French accents because why should they be looked at as the weak link? And instead, could we find a common ground that we could all embrace?" And she said, "No, that's not true. I heard a French accent." And I said, "I know you did."
I said the words.
I was very precise, and I was trying to explain to her that in that, as I was just being precise, you're able to fill it in your mind's ear.
It's almost like there's a proper accent and it has no nationality. It seems to be like there's often like a European accent. Like, where is that from? It's not like, there's so many, but there seems to be sometimes like when speaking English and it's not an American and not a Brit or an Australian, then it's like a European.
Exactly. And I think that's what they were trying to go for when they came up with the mid-Atlantic accent, which when you think about it, it means midway between America and England.
The universal language.
Which is ridiculous.
You just sound like an ice cube.
The iceberg. And,
that's right.
Right.
On the rocks.
Yes, exactly. And yet, you think about performers like Orson Welles, who was born in, Jesus, I'm trying to remember, was it Idaho? You think about people like Vincent Price, who was born in Cleveland, and yet it sounded as though he were British. To an American audience, at least, it sounded as though he was British.
And the Beatles, when they sing, they sound American.
Yeah, which is always kind of weird.
What about Dick Van Dyke and,
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins? Right?
That was the best Australian accent ever.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly think that when you sing, there is no accent.
I think one of the tricks is to pull something off that is not authentic and make it sound authentic. You think about even like the announcer voice, and some people can do an announcer voice and it sounds strangely natural when everyone else is like when they do their announcer voice, it sounds horrible and it's like a cliche of what it is. So sometimes you're doing something that really is not natural, but you sell it and you own it. And that's part of authenticity is it might,
absolutely.
So it might not actually be you, but you're internalizing it. And
and that's the thing that, frankly, we have found out how often white actors were playing non-white roles. And that's just not right. I think we know, when you hear Hank Azaria, who, bless his heart, bless his ever-loving heart, I treasure that man. Hank Azaria has said he will never play Apu again in The Simpsons because that is an Indian role. It's like, the cultural stereotype of the 7-Eleven owner. And Hank said, I don't want to do that in the wake of George Floyd's murder. I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, especially because Apu was really playing on the accent. And
very much so. It was leaning.
It was almost,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was leaning on the accent.
It was
And
purposely
yet-
stereotypical.
Exactly. And yet, I can tell you this. I have done 1,000 audiobooks, and I can tell you that authors present cultural stereotypes all the time. And we have to play everybody. I have to play men. I have to play women. I have to play American men and
Can we
English
hear
men.
your woman's voice really quick?
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah. No, you can't.
No fair.
It's a thing about pitch. It's like, I am never going to sound like a woman. I teach audiobook narration to newcomers, and I say, when you play your opposite gender, make your peace with the fact that you will never sound like the opposite gender. Make your peace with it, because it's just. But there is an unspoken agreement, an unspoken contract with the listener that they know it is one person reading you every role. And so, I can do a scene, multiple scenes. I've done it, God, countless times. Men and women. It's like, why won't you talk to me? I don't want to talk. You never tell me how you feel. I feel like not talking.
Yeah, it's like a softer thing.
Yes, exactly. I aspirate a little bit, and yet I'm not going overboard. I have heard narrators who go into like an almost or like halfway falsetto, and I'm like, really? How many women other than Julia Child have you known who speak in a falsetto?
One second. Sage! Not now.
Perfect
Sorry.
timing.
The fact of the matter is, it's like we play roles that are not ourselves all the time.
I got a question for Simone because, let's be honest, the engineers are the most important people in the equation anyway.
Oh, thank you, Robbo.
Amen and amen.
Without us, there is no recording.
We can make the magic happen.
That's right, exactly. As an audio engineer / director, I'm interested in recording the same thing over a few days. Like I'm disciplined in, I've got to record a 30-second radio commercial. I know how I want it done. So we sit down and I push the voice talent in the direction I want to hear it, and I get what I want. How do you, if you've got to extend that over 3 or 4 days, or I don't know how long it would take to record a book, how do you keep true to that original recording that you started with at the beginning of the book? Like, you get to day 2 and day 3 and things start to shift a bit. Have you really got to concentrate and make sure that you're sort of referencing back to where you began?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. So generally I get the authors in for 3-hour sessions because it's a lot of concentrating, reading a book. And obviously they're trying to give the best performance they can, particularly if, they're not a trained actor or whatever. The majority of books that I've released are self-help, non-fiction. So there's, it's not fiction, it's not a story as such, but generally, I will run the 3-hour tape, end it. The next day they'll come in. I'll give them a little listen to the where they were at the last, 5 minutes of yesterday's recording and match a level, and then start a new tape basically the next day, and do that every day for however long they were here.
And are you like dropping markers through the session? Like, edit here?
What I do is I ask them to bring in a hard copy for me if they've got a printed copy. If not, I'll read off the PDF, and there's not much editing I can do that because I'm obviously concentrating on levels, concentrating they've not missed out any words or slipped over any words, or that there might be, sometimes a plane will fly over, and although it's really soundproofed here and I've had chainsaws and whatever go off across the road, that it doesn't. My microphone's awesome. I use an NT1A, so that's the world's quietest mic.
She's a road girl, boys.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my favourites. Yep. Sometimes if a plane goes over,
cool.
It will really pick up some low frequency, so I can hear that. So I'm sort of concentrating on all of that.
Yeah.
And if I've got the PDF, there's not much I can do because I'm focusing on all of that. But if they bring in a hard copy, I'll read along with the hard copy and mark in that hard copy where their mistakes are. Yeah, and then, if they've fallen over the same line 5 times or whatever, I'll just put by 5 so I know that I go up a bit in the tape so I know where that edit is. And then generally, after I've recorded all of it, I will listen to the whole thing after I've edited it once again, just to make sure I've got everything out that needs to be out and that everything's in that needs to be in.
I guess the good thing about an audiobook is that there's no script changes.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And they generally, the author, I speak with them before we begin and say, now you're obviously understanding what you're reading, that, you're reading from your scripts. So we're basically going to do this all in one take. If you're in the studio and you think when you're narrating, I didn't like the way that came out, please tell me and we'll just record it again. If there's words that you trip over or words that we both think that you can't pronounce, we'll go on YouTube and find the correct pronunciations. But we have a conversation to let them know that this is going to just be one go and that's the finished product. So if you're not happy with what's coming out, make sure you pull me up and say, let's do that again.
So a lot of the stuff, you have one take of it. Like literally, if they read the first paragraph perfectly, you're not going back and reading the first paragraph again.
Yep, that paragraph's gone. It's home.
Yeah.
It's nailed to the wall.
Yeah. The other thing that occurs to me sitting here, I mean, we've been sitting here for let's say 45 minutes recording this episode. I've shifted in my chair. I've turned around. I've, stopped to moved away from the mic to blow my nose and come back. Do you have to be a bit careful about making sure sonically it sounds the same all the way through, or have you sort of figured out a way to sort of keep them close to being on mic in the same position?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I sort of focus on, that they stay in the same position. Yeah. They drink a lot of water in there because a lot of them get a dry mouth. So they'll go run to the toilet and come back and I'll say, now make sure that you're sitting in the same place. Again, go back, have a quick check of the level, make sure it's the same. But that's why I like to just focus, primarily on 3 hours a day, because generally if they haven't drunk too much water, they can hold their concentration, stay where they are. I either get them to stand up if they prefer, because obviously you get the best narration using your diaphragm standing. But if they want to sit, I'll let them sit and have, same space, same distance between the mic and also the iPad, so that, and the same facing way to the microphone. But that's pretty much how it works.
How about mic technique? How much is that a thing in the audiobook world? Because you're saying consistency is key, which we know. How much are you encouraging mic technique in terms of warming up the mic, proximity effect?
Well, from my point of view, I get them to do some breathing exercises on the way, just so that they open up their diaphragm, deep breathing, and, probably the acting exercises that Scott probably knows about, where you, blow air through your mouth and get your lips all vibrated up and warm and ready to go. Some people...
Trumpet players do that too.
Some people...
Not so much about warming up the voice, but actually, I should have used my terms more clearly. Do you encourage people to cozy up to the mic for certain things and back away from the mic for other things? Or do you really lock it down?
Well, like I said before, I've mainly worked with nonfiction, so that hasn't really sort of been a problem as such. But I have done.
True.
I've done one lady who did a crime fiction, actually based here in Logan. It's really, really good, her story, Who Killed Chloe. But probably with her I did a little bit. I'd get her to come closer to the microphone and move further away when she had different scenarios happening and different characters.
You don't have them on headphones. You do not have them on headphones.
No, they don't.
Is my understanding, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that's a little bit harder to play the mic when you're not hearing it. Yeah. But one of the things I was thinking, actually, for consistency and working with people who are not familiar with microphones, like the last thing you want to use is a shotgun mic, because it's very sensitive to the position. But I would wonder if actually for authentic, you're talking about authentic this and that, and one of the things is like an Omni sounds much more authentic than a cardioid that has all that proximity effect. And then if you did have an Omni and your booth wasn't bad, you would have probably a very easy time getting a consistent and very neutral sound.
I'm thinking a headset mic, actually.
Or a headset mic that just puts the mic there and you can't mess up the location of the mic.
Why aren't audiobook narrators using headsets?
Wow, that's a great idea.
You can put the mic in precisely the same place every single time. It's repeatable. The performer can move around more naturally, express.
You can pop every P.
You can pop.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, hey? The popping. I'm like,
Well,
turn
you
your
won't
head a
pop the
little bit.
piece.
Turn your head a little bit.
No, exactly. That
I
goes
can't.
away.
The microphone stays there on the
Yeah.
headset. Mike.
If you put that boom, that headset mic boom in the
Just
right
below,
spot,
yeah.
you won't pop the P's ever. You'll never
That's
have
true.
to fix a pop ever again. And
Pirate Pete's Pizza Picnic.
it seems damn obvious to me.
And,
I mean, I've
and
set
what
them
is
up.
that microphone? That headset mic is probably an Omni.
Well, they have them in both. You can get Omni and Cardioid, but mostly Omni. Scott, how about you? Since you're doing a lot of other character and fiction roles and stuff, are you playing the mic much, or do you pretty much lock it down?
I find myself moving into and out of the mic all the freaking time, constantly throughout my workday, because the closer you get, it's the proximity effect. And from an audiobook standpoint, an audiobook listener standpoint, it's a game changer. Most of you, I would imagine, think about seeing stage productions when you're, maybe 100 feet, 100 yards away from the stage. But then you also have people who are used to watching on TV who are no more than 6 feet away from the performer. When you're doing an audiobook, it's 6 inches away. And you can lean in when it is appropriate and when the author is giving you that clue, when it's appropriate to lean in and get really, really intimate. There was a book called The Passage, which was a TV series on Fox a couple of seasons ago, a couple of years ago. It was a vampirism. Instead of calling them vampires, they called them virals. And that very first vampire was referred to as Zero. That's all they said, Zero. This is Zero. And you didn't know where he was from. There was no indication about, what his nationality was, what his ethnicity was, what his socioeconomic background was. And yet, he would speak. Every book in the series, he would summon people. He could speak to them telepathically. And when he would summon someone, he would say, come to me, 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 come to me. He would summon them. They were all in italics. So what I did is I leaned into the microphone to get back to your question, to use mic technique. I would get really fucking close to the microphone and I would say, come to me, 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 come to me. Those italics that we can see in the print version is indicating that they're hearing it in their head, and come to me sounds as though somebody's speaking in your head. Well, we get to the third volume in this trilogy, and suddenly they tell you who Zero is. And I know what his nationality is. And I spoke to the producer and I said, I don't want to change it. And the series was written in the third person. Zero did this, Zero did that. The hero did this, the hero did that. And yet, when you learned who Zero is, it suddenly switched to first person. And it was 160 pages. And it was essentially like, oh, you want to know who I am? You want to know how I became this way? Very well, I shall tell you. And I thought, shouldn't we do this the exact same way that we've been doing it? Even though the accent was not technically correct from what I had been doing. All I had been doing was mic technique. And I said, are you okay with it if I do the next 160 pages essentially whispering? And she said, totally cool with that. And frankly, every time I am contacted about that series, that's what they talk about.
This is the narrator's craft. This is the narrator's art. This is your skill in the instrument. This is the difference between someone playing a $100 Yamaha plastic synthesizer with no expression and pounding through a song, and an artist at a Steinway playing every note with expression. This is the difference. when you hire an artist, Yeah, so my takeaway is the headset mic is a fantastic solution for an author or the uninitiated or the inexperienced. But there's a certain point where that expression, that mic technique, is part of your artistic expression, not quite the Celine Dion crazy technique, but still it's part of the art of your performance and you know how to use that instrument. So it would never work to strap a headset mic on Scott Brick for him to do his performance. So it's fascinating. It's just different tools for different scenarios. And I still think a headset mic would be brilliant for an author to read their own book or something else where they can just
absolutely
try to forget about the mic.
It's a different skill set. I grew up as a performer. Most authors don't.
That's right. They're the writers.
Yeah.
Let's throw it back to you. The other thing I'm interested in is deliverables. How do you deliver these things? What format?
On a reel.
On a reel.
It's funny you
Some
should
poor
say that.
bastard's
One
got to
of my
sit there
mates-
and digitize the whole thing again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I give it to the author on USB, so they've got a hard copy. And yeah, I use a platform to upload it to Audible, Amazon, iTunes, and pretty much every online retailer for audiobooks globally.
So is there a
how it
standard
goes.
loudness and all that sort of stuff, though, that you've got to deliver?
Yep, there is. So each file's got to be between -23 and -18. They can't go have peak levels higher than -3, and floor noise basically -60
Yeah.
RMS.
Yep. So is noise...
so they're all-
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say they've you generally save them 192-bit, higher if you want in MP3, constant bit rate. They've got to be 44.1 kilohertz. So
That's so interesting that it's 44.1 for audiobooks
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
because it goes back to CDs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is noise reduction your friend in that case with the noise floor?
yeah, noise reduction is my friend. I especially in the cleanup, I will reduce the hum and hiss out of the audio.
Have you got a go-to plugin?
I use NCH. That's an Aussie program, so or Aussie software rather. It was started in Canberra by what was it? And Peter Lupton, I think his name was. But yeah, that's worked really well for me. So they've got WavePad and MixPad that I use, but I think they do video stuff and other bits and pieces. So I generally record on the WavePad, like I said, just straight. Then I don't generally put any special EQ over it. I just put their hum and hiss denoiser. And then I go through afterwards then and listen, obviously, and take out any other extraneous sounds that I can hear, whether they're breaths or whatever. And yeah, generally silence is my best friend. If I'm having dramas with it, I'll just highlight it and silence it.
Yeah,
The bits in between, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
That's interesting because I've got 2 files of room noise. So I just shut the booth door, hit record, which I've kept. And so when I'm doing an edit and I have to take something out, but I need to fill the gap, I'll just grab a piece of room noise and drop it in.
Yeah, right. You can go either way. I guess with the place that I use to upload it, I've always just used silence, so that's worked for me.
It's probably quicker.
Yep.
Yeah, it's about 2 less
Yeah,
Do you
clicks.
take breaths out or do you leave breaths in?
I try and deep breath a whole lot.
Really?
So
Do you
God, you're
use-
brave.
Yep.
yeah, it's a pretty big task.
Yeah.
But it sounds beautiful. I mean, working as a producer, you want the best audio that you can possibly get. So obviously, the more time you put into it, the better it's going to come out. You know what I mean?
I think the breath comes into an authenticity thing. Like, for instance, when I record a spot sometimes and it's not an announcer, I always deep-breath the announcer. But if it's a character, sometimes the breath, the exhale, that's part of the delivery. That's part of the emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe in a fiction.
Yeah, I'm with you, Simone.
Yeah.
I think you're right,
Yes.
probably.
In fiction, yes.
Yeah, definitely in fiction. I certainly left more breaths, and they're needed for the character references. I think in that one fiction one I did rather the non-fictions, and particularly I don't know whether it's the author narrating them. It just sounds much cleaner with the breaths out because they don't know how to breathe, you know what I mean? They're not trained to...
I was going to say, it's like turn away from the mic and you don't have to
That's right.
That's another prime difference, right? Yeah, between the narrator's art and the inexperienced is breath control. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott's doing it constantly just as part of the performance. You wouldn't dream of debriefing, a performance from Scott, I don't think. I mean, unless there was something really out of place, but it's a very different thing. It's very interesting.
I've had people deep breath me all the time. But I do my best to, even when I'm doing the punch and roll, what I typically do is if I'm going to shut down recording and I'm going to start again, I put it a fraction of an inch next to the beginning of the sentence that I was going to say. Then I come in and I try to match the intensity.
You read along with yourself, right?
The pitch. Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. I've got like a 3-second playback in Pro Tools. And when I do that, the next time I make a mistake, I shut down recording and I go back to that edit section, where I punched in the last time, and I edit it out because I think, sometimes when you say, don't do that, it's the inhalation before you say don't do that is equally as important as the line don't do that.
Definitely.
And so I do my best to preserve that. But frankly, to be honest, I work almost exclusively with editors who know my preferences, and every single person who performs their job doing an audiobook is an artist. I always say I know just enough about audio to be dangerous. But the fact of the matter is, I want to hire people who are artists.
Scott, I can't be the only one listening who's shocked to hear you say the word hire, that you're hiring anybody.
Well, is that just because of the rates, or why is that?
No, I'm surprised that you're the producer.
Oh God, no.
When you say you're hiring others, you, sir, are the producer. Is that what's happening here?
Yes. Totally. There's a marvelous company person that I work with, Stephen J. Cohen. He Spoken Realms. He is a narrator as well as a tech guru, and he has a staff, and he understands both sides of it. I hope it's okay to say this. I want to say he's like $75 per finished hour. So when somebody calls me, emails me and says, hey, I want you to do my audiobook, again, not to get into rates, but okay, well, if my rate was, let's say, $400, okay, you're going to pay me $400 to narrate this book. I would say, and that's, of course, $400 per finished hour, not studio hour. I would say, okay, well, then you're going to pay me $475 per finished hour because I need to hire Stephen J. Cohen to do that work for me.
What's interesting is you're being hired in that capacity, not as just a narrator. You're being hired as the narrator / producer.
Or engineer, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
If he's sending it to a producer after.
Exactly. Look, I know how to turn Pro Tools on. I know how to turn Pro Tools off.
I've never been able to turn Pro Tools off because it crashes.
You don't have to. It's automatically.
It turns itself off. Yeah.
Well,
that was
look, the fact I turn Pro Tools on. I set the color scheme to as bright red as I can because I am looking at a tablet, and yet in my field of vision above the tablet, in my peripheral vision, I can check whether or not Pro Tools is running. That's all I want to do. I don't want to do anything more than that. I want to hire somebody who does the cover artwork. I want to do that and feel as though I am contributing to society. I am helping them pay for their medical insurance. It's a thing.
It's about being of service to others, and what you're really good at, that's what you should help people, with. And whatever that you're not so good at, you should find other people that are really good at that to allow them to serve people.
Look,
I definitely agree.
From my church-going days, amen and amen. I can tell you this. What I do is, if you can hear this, I've got a tally clicker. That's how I work now. When I make a mistake, my engineer knows to go back and clean up the clicks, but I can still remain in the emotional state where I was when I was crying at the end of Somewhere in Time.
I'm going to get myself a clicker. What a good idea.
Dog training clickers work too.
Well, AP, given the length of this record session, we might have to hire someone to edit this episode.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks not.
Simone, it's over to you.
Already back's not.
And Robbo, I want every breath taken out.
Yes.
I talk too fucking much. Yeah, that's why.
There's highlight and delete.
Exactly. I do have an idea, though. Talking about audiobooks, get a pop guard with the print of an ear on it.
Whispering into someone's ear,
You're
is that what you're
talking
saying?
straight into someone's ear.
Whispering sweet
Look, here you go, Andrew.
Yeah.
Don't steal it.
Oh,
It's
wow.
mine.
What a marvelous,
Copyright.
what a marvelous idea. That's a marvelous idea.
Yeah.
Seriously, it is. That's an absolutely marvelous idea.
I think before we go, you should both give yourselves a plug. Simone, in Australia, you're the go-to.
Yes,
Where do
thank
people
you.
find you? What do you do?
I'm at brisbaneaudiobookproduction.com. You can also actually find me. I've just opened up a branch in Melbourne, so melbourneaudiobookproduction.com, or you can look up audiobookaustralia.com and you'll find me.
You're very
I'll put you in touch with
multi-talented.
someone.
You can be in 2 cities at once.
Yeah, well, I've got some good guys working in Melbourne, so...
cool.
Who's doing your Melbourne stuff?
A chap called, he's not actually in radio, he's just come out of doing the course here in Brisbane through the AE, what's it called?
SEA or something.
SEA, that's it,
Yeah.
yeah. So his name's Adam Shaw, but he's done a really good job editing some of my books so far, so we're moving on and opening up something in Melbourne.
Lovely.
I was going to ask if you ever deal with remote recordings. Are they all in booth, like in person?
No, I have. I've done one remote recording. The lady was in Tasmania, so she was basically sitting in her walk-in wardrobe and amongst her clothes, and she recorded it that way. So then sent me through the audio and I cleaned it up and edited that thing.
Wow.
So that was a bit tricky. A couple of times I had to say to her, look, you're not sitting in the same same position as what you were. You sound too far away from the mic that you were in the first, 3-hour session. But we got there. And yeah, wasn't too hard. Although I would not say, yeah, can I do those all the time? Just quietly.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're pretty tricky because obviously there's a lot to think about for the author that's narrating them, more so than just standing in a booth with someone that can say, okay, it's all under control. You just have to read.
Yeah.
You have to send them a kit or something, or yeah, there's a lot to do.
Also, Scott Brick, I'm assuming you have multiple agents that look after you.
I do. Multiple agents. There's Abrams artists who look after me in multiple cities. Yes. LA.
Abrams. Yes,
New York.
I know Abrams well. I used to
yes.
visit Neil on the odd occasion I was in New York.
They have treated me so well. I told them that my one of my goals in life was to work for PBS because I'm a member of the very first generation that ever watched Sesame Street on PBS. And it was very cool. It was about 6 months ago. They said, yeah, we've been pitching you to PBS, and they said they want you to audition for this. And I auditioned, and they said, we love your audition. We're going to cast somebody else. We're going to keep you in mind. And I said, fuck. Pardon my French. And they said, that's okay. You didn't book the job, but you booked the room. They really, And I think that for any voice actor, that is something to keep in mind. You may not book the job, but if you book the room, by which I mean make an impression on the people who are casting that job, they will keep you in mind.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, not only did they cast me for a PBS gig, it was something about Christmas, and I live for Christmas. I'm sitting in a studio where I have 3 blow molds on the shelf above my desk. I have a Santa, an elf, and another Santa. I live for Christmas. And the very first gig I ever did for PBS was about Santa Claus. And I was like, you know what? Booking the room is far more important than booking the job. So.
Yeah. As I always say to my daughter, your job is to audition. The rest is the cherry on the top.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Beautiful.
true. I mean, look. We've got the everybody has a demo, right?
Yeah.
Well, what's the root word of demo? It's demonstrate.
Demonstration.
Yeah.
Your job is to demonstrate who you are. These are my skills. This is who I am. Our job in many ways is to just let all of the casting people in the industry get to know who we are and what we would be most appropriate for. And in this case, it was Christmas. So,
Ho, ho, ho.
Absolutely.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho. Yes, indeed. Well, on that note, we have created our very own first edition, which is now available on Audible.
Right.
So thank you, Simone Feiler, and thank you, Scott Brick.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite recorded using Rode NTG5s and Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, proaudiosuite.com.
I'm going to get everybody to start rolling then.
I'm so glad I recorded this whole thing. I have no idea what I'll do with it, but it's been highly entertaining.
That's funny.
I've been thinking about doing a blog about the setup for this. Recording this podcast.
should.
And
Definitely
it's like,
should.
Jesus Christ, do I want to do it now?
Okay, am I coming through?
I'm still not getting you on Source Connect.
Press too many buttons. Sausage fingers. You go to press one button, you press 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Should we get this done?
Cool. Let's shall.
All right.
Just put the mic a fist width from your mouth, Scott. Eat the mic.
Put some ketchup on it, just
Yeah,
put some Vegemite on it, right?
Yeah,
That's what
there you go.
exactly.
Vegemite. I
Yeah.
tell you what, I drove past the Vegemite plant.
Yes.
Did you die?
I do that on the way to Melbourne whenever I go in.
I don't know that I've ever needed to vomit more. I'm an American. I don't get the Vegemite thing.
It's an acquired taste.
I understand why. So is beer. So is bourbon. I acquired both of those. I'm sure if I spent more time down under, I would as well. But I drove past and I thought, oh my God, I think I just threw up on my mouth.
Yeah, that's the one.
The only thing I haven't figured out is what's
Driving
worse,
by
Vegemite
on
or Marmite.
I think
Exactly.
Aussies like it because we're all sort of force-fed it since birth, basically.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I hate the smell of that factory, though. The factory's a
Is
killer.
it?
The wet cardboard and poo. That's kind of weird.
we eat that shit.
Okay.
My
I live
friend
left-
described it as what's left at the bottom of a barrel after you're done brewing beer.
I remember Mikey
Yeah.
Robbins filling in on the breakfast show at a radio station I was working at once, and he had Melissa Etheridge in the studio, and he gave us some Vegemite on toast to taste. And the first words out of her mouth was, "Oh, it tastes like a cat's bum." The first words out of Mikey's
you know?
mouth were, "How do you know?"
Somebody bring me some water.
That's right, exactly. That's right.
Meow. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Are we ready?
I am.
Yep.
Ready to rock and roll.
Everyone roll?
Snap.
Yeah, why not? Just for the hell of it.
3. Da-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na.
It's a dumb tradition, Scott.
I've
Yeah,
never made a
sad.
bad commercial ever.
I didn't say I hadn't made a bad audio book, but I was certainly heard a few.
Sure,
It's like you get that polishing rag out and start polishing. Yeah.
Rightio, guys, I'm going to have to head now.
Yeah, I got to run.
Yeah.
So, guys, if
Yeah, me too.
Is there any preference? Is it just like a straight wave, like
just a
just the
mono
format has gone
wav,
down, or
mono wav.
I'd convert it to Sound Designer 2 for Rabo.
48? Mono
thanks,
wave,
Robert.
48.
Yeah, love your work.
Yeah, good on you. Fucking. You got my details if you
for an
feel
audio
like
book
the
narrator?
agony of trying to get me to read a book.
Well, you said you hated the idea. So
Could be perfect for it then. At least I won't be disappointed.
So I always knew that was going to be shit. Awesome.
Well, I was just saying thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Glad you enjoyed it. It was
Lovely.
great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. We just can't afford $400 an hour, just so you know.
But we can pay you in Vegemite if that works.
Yes.
Polished and glittered.
Polished and glittered.
You can't roll it in glitter.